everyone. Take our seats. Good morning. Thank you all so much for spending a little time with us this morning. We appreciate your willingness to take a break from your day to discuss several of the most important issues facing our nation, particularly as in regards to budgetary and fiscal matters. I have just finished a number of town halls. Some of you I recognize. You were able to attend them across the 1st District about our nation's precarious fiscal situation and the brokenness in Washington. While people have very different ideas on how we need to be moving forward to best address our debt problem and economic recovery, most everyone does agree that moving forward positively will take great courage and great resolve. So with that said, I am very proud to welcome Mr. David Walker here this morning. David is one of our nation's leading voices on budgetary reform. For years he has been warning anyone who would listen about the risk associated with our federal government's spending and budgeting priorities. David Walker is an expert in this field. From 1998 to 2008, he served as Comptroller General of the United States and Director of the Government Accountability Office, serving in both the Clinton and George W. Bush administrations. The U.S. Government Accountability Office, also known as the GAO, is an independent, nonpartisan agency that works for Congress. Often called the Congressional Watchdog, the GAO investigates how the federal government spends taxpayer dollars. In 2008, David left the GAO to direct the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, where he helped create IOUSA, a popular documentary film focusing on the impact of the national debt. And since that time, he has founded the Come Back America initiative. In this capacity, he leads the organization's efforts to promote fiscal responsibility and sustainability by engaging the public and assisting key policymakers on a nonpartisan basis to help achieve solutions to America's federal, state, and local fiscal imbalances. Now, I want to tell you all a little story. Some of you might have been in the neighborhoods that were hit by that pretty strong windstorm the other night. I was as well. I was upstairs in my house reading, and I looked outside my window, and I saw the trees whipping around, and the wind and the rain began to circle. I yelled out to my children, "Get down in the basement." This upset my 5-year-old. She started to cry, but we made it all down there as a family, not knowing exactly what was happening with the weather. But this storm quickly passed us by, and there was just a few moments of sunlight left. And you know the first sound I heard? Chainsaws. People were already outside cleaning it up. Now, David, that's what we do in Nebraska. We just try to clean up the mess. And in Washington, we've got a great big fiscal mess, as you all know. And that's why your willingness to come here and engage with us today and to be open and receptive to creative solutions that can move us forward with a new paradigm as to how we get our fiscal house in order is very meaningful to me, and I know very meaningful to Mr. Walker as well. So please help me welcome Mr. David Walker.
Thank you, Congressman. We should be working. Can you hear me in the back? Is that all right? Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to come back to Nebraska. This is the first time that I've had the opportunity to be in Lincoln. I've been in Nebraska previously, most notably in Omaha. And it's also a pleasure to be with Congressman Fortenberry. I appreciate the invitation very much to be here. I do these types of events for Republicans and Democrats and independents in the Senate and in the House in order to try to get out the facts, the truth, and the tough choices about where we've been, where we are, where we're headed, and what we're going to need to do in order to put this country on a more prudent and sustainable path if we want our future to be better than our past. And so you need to understand, the facts aren't Republican or Democrat. The facts are the facts. People will have different opinions about the best way forward, but I can tell you that our financial condition is much worse than advertised. We are rapidly approaching a tipping point, and we are at a critical crossroads in the history of this country. And it's very, very important that we come together with nonpartisan solutions that can get bipartisan support so we can avoid having a U.S. debt crisis, so that America will stay great, and so the standard of living for our children and grandchildren can be better in the future. If we make the right choices, that can happen. If we don't, our best years may be behind us. And that's downright un-American. Let me say, I'm also a big college football fan. Good. And one of the best teams in the country is here and has always been here. But let me also disclose that I was born in Alabama, and I have been to more than one Alabama-Nebraska game, especially when I was growing up in Miami, and those teams appeared in the Orange Bowl together many times, and hopefully they'll get together in the future, and may the best team win. We'll just leave it at that. Let me start out with a few graphics, and we're going to open it up for Q&A. The budget of the federal government has changed dramatically in the last 40 years. First, you need to understand, adjusted for inflation, federal spending has more than tripled, adjusted for inflation, in the last 40 years. And the composition of the budget has changed from being dominated by defense to being dominated by social insurance programs. And furthermore, 40 years ago, over 60% of the budget was decided by Congress every year, so-called discretionary spending. Now it's less than 40%, and it's going down to less than 20% over the next 30 years if we don't change. And guess what? Discretionary spending includes all of the express and enumerated responsibilities envisioned by the Founding Fathers for the federal government. National defense, homeland security, federal judicial system, Congress, executive office of the president. And so the fact is that we are losing control. Spending has been out of control, especially in the last 10 years. And it is a bipartisan problem. You will have an opportunity to see these slides. I commend them to you. If it's solid blue down below, that means the Democrats control both houses of Congress. If it's solid red, it means the Republicans control both houses of Congress. If it's mixed, it means it was a split Congress. And then on the top, you can see which party controlled the White House. This is adjusted for inflation per person. The last 10 years have been the most fiscally irresponsible in the history of the United States. Let me repeat that. The last 10 years have been the most fiscally irresponsible in the history of the United States. The most fiscally irresponsible year in the history of the United States arguably was 2003. Now let me state for the record that Congressman Fortenberry didn't come into office until 2004. But you can't blame him for it, all right? Three things happened in 2003. Number one, second round of tax cuts. We could afford the first but not the second. We were already back into deficits. Secondly, we invaded a sovereign nation without declaring war and without paying for it, Iraq. And thirdly, we expanded health care benefits under Medicare, Medicare prescription drugs, added $8 trillion in new unfunded promises when Medicare was already underfunded $19 trillion. 3-0, all irresponsible. And why did it happen in 2003? Because the statutory budget controls that were in place from the early 90s expired in 2002, and things have spun out of control ever since. The real problem is not today's deficits, $1.5 trillion. Not today's debt, $14.6 trillion. It's the off-balance sheet obligations, the unfunded obligations for Medicare, Social Security that are multiple times greater. Based on reasonable assumptions, this country is in the hole $62 trillion. Now, how much is $62 trillion? It's $200,000 for every man, woman, and child in the United States. It's $530,000 per household in the United States, and median household income in America is $50,000.